Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
That's what I'm here for, so we might as well do it.
Let's do it. We'll start with this. A couple questions have popped up in the chat that I like, so we'll get back to those here. And, of course, you can throw some questions up in the chat if you want.
Just remember, I answer anything that's a super chat. We established this last week.
Right. As uncomfortable as it might be. Fill in the blank. The most underrated thing Marcus Freeman has done since becoming Notre Dame head coach is blank.
I think a lot of what I'm going to say falls under the bigger umbrella of culture, but I think the main word I'm looking for is has enhanced relationships. His relationship with players, his relationship with the media, and his relationship with his fellow coaches, I think has led to a more harmonized program at the end of the day. Like, look at how many players have transferred out over the, especially this season and last season. I just think that there's a lot of guys who love playing for Marcus Freeman because of his open communication and his honesty with everyone. He has the hard conversations, and, whether or not it's what you want to hear as a player, you definitely appreciate it because there's no lying, there's no conniving. Everyone's on the same page. And so I think that's a very underrated aspect of what Marcus Freeman has done. He's honest to everyone. And at the same time, he's like everyone's best friend. Everyone loves to talk to Marcus Freeman, to have that relationship with Marcus Freeman. So I think that's what would be my, underlying kind of under the radar successful thing that he's been doing.
Yep. That's a pretty good one. Ryan says accountability. I think that's part of what you're talking about there as well. It's you do wonder if the previous head coach was still here, what this transfer portal might be looking like right now. Whereas they had two guys go into the portal at the end of the spring. What would that look like? How different would that look right now? I think it's a very good question. Mine is more on-field related, but I do like your answer that you gave there. To me, it's winning 9 games with Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner as his starting quarterbacks in season 1, because Pine won 3 games against ranked teams, and 2 of them were away from Notre Dame Stadium. One of them was at Syracuse. The other, of course, was the Shamrock Series game against BYU. BYU's first loss of the season. Syracuse's, I think, first loss of the season, if I remember right. But, they combined to win 9 games in a season, and then they combined to play in 4 games last season when they each went to new schools. And neither one of them, of course, is playing for those schools anymore. One of them's not even playing football anymore. He's playing a completely different sport right now. So I think now you can look at the other side and still, you can still say, hey, they should have beaten Marshall in Stanford. That's absolutely true. But I do think that in a first season with a first-year head coach and what they had playing quarterback, and the fact that he won 9 games with those guys at quarterback, I think completely goes underrated, in part because it was overshadowed by those bad losses. But then you bounce back at the end of the season, and with Drew Pine as your quarterback, he doesn't even throw for 100 yards, and you just wallop Clemson at home as well. So I think it's completely underrated what he did that first season with those guys.
Yeah, I think it is underrated as well, and I think it would have went a lot further along with more people had he won 10 games. I think the fact that there was, the 3 losses and 2 of them were to some of the, not so great teams. I really feel like that double-digit win thing is what stuck in a lot of people's minds. But, kind of going – and I agree with what you're saying, and going back to kind of what I was saying, I just don't hear anyone say anything negative about Marcus Freeman. You know what I mean? Like, you never hear players, coaches, media, personnel,
we were talking about – yeah.
But it never felt like that with Brian Kelly. Like, there was always someone who was like, that – but I feel like that's a big difference in running a program that is just honest and has a lot of integrity, accountability, kind of what Ryan was saying. I think, like I was saying, that all kind of falls under the big umbrella of culture, in my opinion.
I like this from Salty as well. He says it's underappreciated how well Freeman has worked the administration to build exactly the staff he wants and has gotten admissions to ease up a bit. Yeah, I mean, that's a big one as well. And, look, Brian Kelly, was kind of the squeaky wheel. They say the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and Brian Kelly was the squeaky wheel for a long time, and he had to push the administration to get some changes. You do still have to give him credit for some of those things that he, got changed along the way. But at some point, there kind of just became, I think, a line in the sand where it's like, okay, enough. Are you going to win a national championship or not? Because that's still the goal here. And Brian Kelly definitely got to that point where it was just best for both sides to move on. And where Marcus Freeman is now, has Marcus Freeman maybe benefited from basically not being Brian Kelly, and having a different kind of demeanor and personality? I think you can make a case for that, for sure. Michael says, when no one criticizes a head coach of Notre Dame, that is successful, and that is a huge accomplishment. And, look, Freeman has had some criticism, but as Vince and I were talking, I think it was, almost 2 weeks ago, we were doing the stock up, stock down thing, whose stock rose the most, and we started off talking about Marcus Freeman. This is the time of year, the last couple of years, where Freeman's stock has climbed the highest because you're in the off season. All these other things are going well. He continues to stack good recruiting classes, and just that natural charm, that natural personality that he has, rises to the top. But let's not forget, when he's been in season the first couple of years, he totally got a free pass that first season because of the transition and maybe part of, who he had at quarterback and that kind of thing. But he got more criticism last year, for the 10 men on the field at the end of Ohio State, for laying a complete egg against Louisville, and for really barely showing up against Clemson as well. He definitely caught more criticism last year, but he finished off with bowl wins both seasons. And he's done very well in the transfer portal. Again, he's done very well in recruiting, and that has helped his stock rise back up after maybe a little bit of a lull during the season. It's right back up in the offseason as well. He knows the right buttons to push and things to say, and things continue to go well for him. But I think there's gonna be a little bit more sort of pressure ratcheting up as it continues into year 3. Herrick brought this up. We talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show when we were talking about the quarterbacks. He says, can you compare Brian Kelly's best 5 quarterbacks to Marcus Freeman's best quarterback recruits? Some people don't understand the difference Freeman has made on the recruiting trail. I mean, like, Brian Kelly's best 5 quarterbacks, I mean, theoretically, Brandon Wimbush was supposed to be one of his best 5 quarterbacks. He had a pretty good season in 2017, and then obviously accuracy became a major issue. So, I mean, Kelly had some success recruiting quarterbacks, whether it was Everett Golson, Brandon Wimbush, Deshaun Kaiser, Phil Jurkovec, Malik Zaire, but they all ultimately performed at different levels. I think what's interesting, because Kelly had been there for 12 years by the time he left. What I brought up yesterday, look at the last 5 quarterbacks that Kelly brought in and the first 5 quarterbacks that Marcus Freeman has brought in. Kelly's last 5 quarterbacks: Drew Pine, Tyler Buckner, Brendan Clark, Steve Angeli, and then, of course, Jack Cohn from the transfer portal. Freeman's first 5 quarterbacks: C.J. Carr, Kenny Minchie, Deuce Knight, and then Sam Hartman and Riley Leonard from the transfer portal. Is there a little bit of disparity in that list of 5?
There's a big disparity in that list of 5.
And
big disparity.
Yes. And that's a program change. I mean, that's a game changer right there. When you look at those 2 lists, the last 5 quarterbacks under a 12th year head coach like Brian Kelly, the first 5 quarterbacks under a going into his 3rd season head coach like Marcus Freeman. Huge.
Do you remember how good Gunnar Kiel was supposed to be?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's another good one. Gunnar Kiel was supposed to be all world and transferred, and, unfortunately for
Phil
him,
Jurkovec.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Okay, so fill in the blank. It's blank that Markus Burton didn't make the 78-man cut for an invitation to the NBA's draft combine?
Yeah, I think that this is not overly surprising. And I think the only hesitancy I have is that this NBA draft class comparatively isn't as strong as maybe what we've seen over the last, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But it's still not overly surprising to me because, he's undersized. He was a true freshman. And I think there's just more opportunity for his game to grow at Notre Dame than being in the G League or, or wherever it might be on the low levels of the NBA. I actually think it's better for his game to come back to college and potentially be a lottery type pick because, first of all, he's going to make probably more money with NIL than he would in the G League. He's going to be close to his, family and friends. He's close to his hometown. He's going to start, obviously. He's going to play a lot, obviously. And he's going to be the face of a program that's trying to climb its way back into, legitimacy in the NCAA basketball world, right? And then on top of that, like you're helping Micah Shrewsbury rebuild this program. I know that's not what it's all about, but when you factor all those things in, I think you're going to get more of a spotlight if you can be successful in this role at Notre Dame than you would, again, being in the low levels of the G League somewhere. Like Blake Wesley, more talented than Burton, and he's still, not necessarily a guy that's, an everyday starter in the NBA, right? And so that,
but he's also a freak athlete, and that's why
Right.
he got to the NBA as quickly
Right.
as he did.
And that's the thing. Burton, again, undersized. I think he's got to be he's like 5'10" without his shoes on, like he's probably the smallest guy at the combine. And yeah, like you said, he's not going to jump crazy. He's not going to jump crazy. His speed's not going to be crazy. It's just, he's very relative in terms of his athleticism. So I just think he needs to allow his game to develop and be on the stage at Notre Dame.
And that's it. Just continue to develop. Just because the answer is no now doesn't mean it's the end. There's still a lot more that Markus Burton can do. He's just got to, realize that you might want to play in the NBA. All these guys want to play in the NBA, but it's just not your time right now. And there's still a lot of development he can get by coming back to Notre Dame and completing this deal now. Because like Tom Noy and I were talking about this last week, and you mentioned some of it. The size is a factor. And when you're that size, you have to have plus tools, plus skills in at least a couple other areas to make up for that. Like
it's like an MLB player that's slow. You better be able to hit some freaking home runs if you're going to be running slow.
Exactly. And so if you're 5'10", you better be a 45% 3-point shooter, or you better have, the most wicked crossover in the game, or you better be, like you need
something
to be able to do, freakish, whatever, get
something
up
that puts
rim.
you in like the 99th percentile that no one else can do.
Right. But he can still grow into that. Look at Steph Curry. He went the Davidson route. Like, people told him no before he even went into college, and that's why he went to Davidson. And then he stuck around for 3 years. He continued to grow. He, even coming out of Davidson, he wasn't supposed to be what Steph Curry turned into in the NBA. So you can still get there. Just come back and keep working on your game. Because again, like there were over 200 people who applied to get into the combine. They only took 78. So there were a lot of people who were told no, so like, don't just take this and say, well, I'm going to go overseas and do whatever. Like, develop your game. That's part of what being in college is all about. And like you said, you still get a chance to be at Notre Dame, where he wanted to be to begin with, in front of his friends and family, play close here, help Micah Shrewsbury turn this program around. And I think that within a couple of years that there's a really good chance that he could be much more ready to go to the NBA at that point. Wanted to go back. Herrick, how do you feel about recruiting in Australia for a punter? Seems like we landed potential gold. I mean, you get a guy who is physically developed, who is an adult man now at this point, at 22, 23 years old, and James Rendell. He played Australian rules football, and he's been working on it for a little while. I think it is a great route. And, we rattled off last week when we talked about this, all the guys, like I think it is the last two. Yeah, the last two Ray Guy Award winners have come from Australia. They've been Australian rules football guys who have come from this Pro Kick Australia, the program that's training these guys to come to America and be punters. So, I think it's, like it came fairly unexpectedly to most of us, but I think it can end up being really big for Notre Dame. I really like the path that they went to do this.
Yeah, the main reasons I like this is you have a mentally mature player, first of all, right? I think that also leads to his determination to the next step. Like, he is using Notre Dame just as much as Notre Dame is using him.
Sure.
Because he is determined to go on to the next level. Like, he wants to go to the NFL. So this guy is mentally mature. He's determined. He's physically mature. And then you start getting into the punting aspect of things. I mean, he's got terrific hang time. I like these Australian kickers because of, I call it the yap, the yards after the punt. Basically, the ball just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. Like, I don't care how you get 60 yards. I just care that you get 60 yards, right? And with those Australian guys, too, I feel like a lot of returners are more there's a higher degree of something going wrong, because when you're trying to field those, those rolling balls that are, it can lead to muffs. It can lead to, just all kinds of stuff. It's just an extra layer, or you're adding a degree of probability of something going wrong when those guys are essentially trying to field that football like a ground ball, right? And so I think when you add all of those things up, I think it's a great decision for Notre Dame.
Look, and they had go ahead.
And it goes into what Marcus Freeman has said before. Even if we're not scoring points, we need the offense to at least be successful enough that we can flip the field. So I think if you can have a punter like this, it really plays into what Marcus Freeman is he's like kind of playing battleships out there. Even when they're not scoring, obviously he's trying to flip the field as much as possible.
Right. And when you got 5-2 hang time, they needed to get better as a coverage unit. They ranked in the 90s last year in punt coverage. They needed to get better with that. That hang time is going to help solve a lot of that. And when you've got the kind of defense that Notre Dame is going to have, there are a lot of people predicting this to be, like a top 3 or 4 defense in the nation this season. When you've got this kind of weapon and the offense that they're going to have, it's, great. You talk about complimentary, just great all around game, I think. Speaking of Australia, they did go down under to get Rendell last week. My question is, would you buy or sell Notre Dame ever playing an actual game in Australia?
I personally would buy it, because I think it'd be a great, like destination game or vacation, however you want to put it. I think it'd be a great time. I get to visit a country I've never been to before. I'm sure there's lots of other things to do there outside of, seeing a Notre Dame football game. But I sell it personally for college football, because I don't think there's enough of a fan base or enough of a following outside of these, these punters, where you could get it done. So, personally, to be selfish, I'd love a vacation and seeing Notre Dame in Australia. I just don't think it logistically makes sense for college football.
I mean, was there a fan base in Ireland before Notre Dame started going over there and playing games? And, you kind of got a
well, at least it's like Irish, though, Ireland, Irish. Like,
that's true. But like, there are more college games that they're shipping over there now. And you've obviously
got the
got
sponsorship
NFL Europe.
with Guinness. So
yeah. And Australia is the continent that is completely untapped in terms of football. It seems like the NFL has not gone there to play. They're going to South America. They've obviously been to different points around Europe, whether it's Germany or London and, all over the place over there. Why not go to Australia? And if this is a potential, sort of developmental area for punters, why can't it be a developmental area for other players as well? And I think it would be very unique. And, Notre Dame always kind of likes to try to be first with a lot of this stuff, be trendsetters. Why not go to Australia? And I realize it's a long flight, and it would, a lot that would go into it. But I mean, it's a long flight to go to Europe, Ireland and that whole thing as well. So why not? I think it would be really unique. I see Jesse is barking at the dogs right now. Now, on another subject, where's a place in the United States that the Irish have not played that you would like to see them play a Shamrock Series game?
Yeah, I think it's fair to kind of go through where they have played. I'll start with the places they've been to more than once. I believe they've been to the Alamo Dome twice. They've been to Yankee Stadium 3 times. They've been to FedEx Field once, Soldier Field once, AT&T Stadium once, Lucas Oil Stadium once, Fenway Park once, and then the most recent one, which was Allegiant out in Vegas. So you kind of remove those ones. I came up with 4, and I think the last one is more fun because of selfish reasons. But I think the ones that logistically make sense are SoFi out in LA. I think that would be great if you could play USC out in SoFi Stadium. I think another one potentially would be Mercedes-Benz. While I hate Atlanta travel, the airport and the traffic, the venue is sweet. And every time I'm in Atlanta, I do have a good time. It's just kind of getting there and getting settled in. That's the hard part. So SoFi and Mercedes-Benz are up there for me. And then I think a fun one would be Gillette Stadium, playing out in Boston. I think you could make a lot of connections there. You know what I mean? While the stadium or the venue is a little dated, compared to SoFi and Mercedes-Benz, I think that's the only thing. It's not a true dome type style. I think that would hold it back.
I think Michael has a good point. I believe they are playing Georgia Tech at Mercedes-Benz this season.
Oh,
so they haven't played there yet. Yep, they haven't played there yet, but they will be. Yeah. Yep.
So that gets rid of that. So my last one, because I like when they do these inside Yankee Stadium and Fenway Park and those sort of things. Why not go out to Petco, play a nice game inside the Padres Stadium? I think that'd be a good awesome experience, just because the weather there is always great.
I mean, you're basically taking every ballpark.
Is really
cool.
So,
I don't know, there's many left on my list that I can actually get out there, but I was thinking like Oracle Park in San Francisco would be one. I know they played bowl games and stuff. That would be a unique venue. I don't know if it would seat enough to make it worth it, but I think that would be very interesting. Like a play. They obviously go to Stanford every other year, but I think it would be unique to play a game there in San Francisco. They've never actually played, in San Francisco, and specifically at Oracle Park, or even Seattle, I think would be a good one. Somebody mentioned Lambeau Field, USMA 87.
They're supposedly
that.
Doing
and I think
that
someone else, they will be playing Wisconsin there in 2 years, 2026. They will be playing Wisconsin. They will finally get that game that was postponed due to COVID back in 2020. They'll be doing that.
My final answer is going to be SoFi in LA and Petco in San Diego.
Okay.
So what you said, you were saying
I said Oracle in San Francisco and Seattle as well. I can't think of the name.
I think Seattle would be a lot of. I considered Seattle a lot too. I just didn't know how many fans are up in that northwest corner of the United States. That was my only. You know what I mean? I don't know how tied to Washington, Oregon State. That's deep Pac-12 country. So
and part of one of the issues that you get into when you're trying to schedule these games is like when you play in Seattle's going to become Big Ten territory now. And when you play in, and it might even get more complex to schedule these because of just the total reach of some of these conferences. You're subject to, like, when Notre Dame plays a Shamrock Series game, like they're going to play Army at Yankee Stadium, that game will be on NBC. It's basically a Notre Dame home game, for those purposes. But like when you get in, like, remember when they went to Arlington, for example, when we went down there, when they played Arizona State, well, it had to be Arizona State and not one of the Texas schools that you played there. Otherwise you would have been subject to the Big 12 TV contract, and they would have taken it over. So that comes into play when you're trying to schedule some of this.
Let me ask you this: if Notre Dame were to play Michigan, and they brought back Michigan for like a season or two, and they did, basically a home and home, like they did with Ohio State, and how they're going to do coming up with some other schools. Where would you put? And let's say Notre Dame made their home game the Shamrock Series game against Michigan. The first time they played them and 10 years or whatever, where would you put that game at?
I would probably wait until the new Bears stadium was built and play it there if they ever do that. I know that there's already some snags in that big proposal that they came out with a couple of weeks ago. But that would be because I think that would be, in terms of the fan base, you wouldn't be on either campus. Like if you're going to play a home and home and then at a neutral site, I think that would be a good place to do it.
Do you think Ford Field would be any fun?
No, I wouldn't go for that.
I think Ford Field, and this is nothing personal, I just think it's a very boring indoor stadium.
Yeah.
Like there's just not a lot to it.
No.
It's nice.
There's really not.
It just reminds me of Lucas Oil in a lot of ways. Like it's nice, but it just feels like it's a big old rectangle with not a lot, going on inside.
Yeah, and it's down underground as well. It doesn't protrude up top and that kind of thing. Comerica, like would that be? Would it? Do you like doing the football games at the baseball ballparks?
I think if the venue is really cool, I think it's a lot of fun. Like San Diego would be beautiful in September or October.
John suggested Vegas. Remember, they played BYU in Vegas already, so they've already been there. But, because we said a place in the U.S. that they haven't been. But I would imagine they'll end up going back to Vegas at some point. That seemed to be a trip
L.A.,
that
I'm telling you, they're going to play USC inside SoFi at some point.
That would be. I mean, it would be a better venue than the Coliseum for everybody. Michael Park says Mexico. I don't see any problem with that. Now, even though again, our question was where in the United States would you want them to play? But I think Mexico is an interesting one. There is actually a couple of reporters, I believe, who are at least originally from Mexico, who are up here covering Notre Dame home games. They've been here for the last several years, so there at least appears to be some interest down in Mexico. So I think that would be an interesting spot as well. So I'm not sure. So Kevin says, I looked at all three major platforms. All have
Shanklin favored to Indy. What did I miss?
Oh, is this a recruiting question? Well, you'll have to bring that up with Ryan. I'm sorry, Kevin, I can't answer that question. So I don't know if Ryan is still here to answer that. Brent was asking about the boards. He says, what's the status of IB memberships? Do you have to be a premium member to access the boards? Yes, you do. The boards are subscription, the Champions Lounge, the new Champions Lounge, but I highly recommend it because there's a lot going on there.
So they're talking about Damian Shanklin. He's from Warren Central, Indianapolis, class of 25. Edge rusher, 4-star commit. Yeah. And it says that he is 100% crystal balled to Notre Dame right now. So,
okay.
Again, I just gave you a lot of surface information at which a lot of people probably knew. If you want more in-depth information, I wish Ryan was still here.
Yeah, if you're a member of the Champions Lounge and you can go to the new Champions Lounge and post that as a question, you might get an answer there. What are you thumbs downing for?
I will never go to Lincoln Financial Field, ever. That is the last place. I'm trying to enjoy my experience there.
Yeah. Indeed for Life says Busch Stadium in St. Louis. That would be an interesting
That's
one.
a nice – I think if they would do –
middle of the country, like
but what I was going to say is I would rather do Pittsburgh than St. Louis because that backdrop at Pittsburgh is phenomenal.
Yeah, they've played there a few times though, so I don't know how unique that because they played Pitt there when they.
I'm saying put it on the baseball field, PNC Park.
Oh, okay, that would be interesting as well. So the NFL schedule release is coming out soon. We don't know exactly when it's going to be. They don't give you an exact date until they actually get the schedule completed and then come out. It basically anytime in the next 2 weeks. They could release it. But the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs are going to get the customary first game of the season to kick it off on a Thursday night. So they have home games against the Chargers, Broncos, Raiders, Bengals, Buccaneers, Ravens, Texans, and Saints. So who should the Chiefs face in that Thursday night season opener of those options?
So I am a big fan of not playing a division rival on your first game of the season, especially
Me too.
on a Thursday night. So I think that eliminates a third of it. So let's get rid of the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Raiders. I think the Buccaneers and the Saints are pretty boring, just average teams. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to see them on my first game of the year type situation. So let's go ahead and get rid of them. And so that it comes down to either the Ravens or the Bengals for me. The Ravens would be a great football game, obviously a rematch of the AFC Championship game. I don't know if you want to put that type of caliber game first of the season, right? Like that's, as a fan, that's great. But as a team, I wouldn't want to play such an important of a game to open the season.
And from the NFL scheduling perspective, you could push that to a little bit later in the season and still get great viewership and not have to put that at the start of the season.
So I think I would go Ravens or Texans, but I think Texans would win because of what you're saying. It's a low-key team. They don't get a lot of publicity, but they are really good last season. They came on strong, and I think it'd be a good opening matchup to kind of see, all right, this is the Super Bowl champs, and here's a team that could potentially, if they build on their last season or, have the possibility to make a run at the Super Bowl. So I think you have two very good teams to start. So I'm going with Texans.
It's kind of like last year, the Chiefs and Lions kicked
Lions,
off the season.
And
the
Lions
were the
hot.
up-and-coming team, and they did it for that reason. Like you dropped the Texans in there right away, the up-and-coming team, and there's no guarantee that they're going to be really good again throughout the entirety of the season. So put them up front. They were two playoff teams from a year ago. Put them up front and put them in that Thursday night game because that's going to get a ton of eyeballs because it's the very first game and it's the defending champs. Personally, I'd rather see the Bengals in there because you got the Joe Burrow storyline.
And that was my other angle on that was can we see are the Bengals going to bounce back? Is Joe Burrow done with all of these injuries and are they ready to, get back to form essentially?
Right. I think that would be a good one. Although you could easily push that 2 or 3 weeks and probably play it on a Sunday or Monday night or something like that. I've got a feeling that like Chiefs and Ravens and or Chiefs and Bengals are going to be Sunday night football games, and you'll probably get Chiefs and Chargers as a Monday night game at some point because of the Jim Harbaugh factor, and that's going to become a big new rivalry in the AFC West with Jim Harbaugh moving in. Fill in the blank. The most interesting basketball player to watch right now is blank.
This was tough. I'm going to go with Anthony Edwards because, before I give my rationale, I'll kind of give you who my final four were. I had Anthony Edwards, Victor Wembanyama, Luka Doncic, and Jalen Brunson. I think Luka Doncic is – everyone knows about Luka Doncic, right? Like he is who he is. He's been a face in the league. He scores a lot of points. Okay. Jalen Brunson, I think he's really interesting because he's come on really strong with the Knicks. What he's done, these last 4 playoff games, 40-plus points in 4 straight. Like only, 7 or 8 guys have done that all time, including MJ and LeBron and, some of the other great ones. But the thing about Brunson, he's just a little bit old, and so it's like I don't know if you want a guy – that's a little bit older to kind of be your exciting player. Victor Wembanyama is really interesting because he's just so big. Like the amount of blocks that guy gets, and then his ability to shoot the ball. He can dribble like a point guard, even though he's over 7 foot tall. But I think Anthony Edwards is ultimately the guy because he reminds me so much of Michael Jordan, just like the competitive trash talking all the time and constantly backing it up. And his game elevates as the stakes of the game also elevates, right? And so you're talking about a guy who's 22 years old, has, plays a very similar game style to MJ. And again, just watching him in these playoffs games and then beating the Nuggets the last few nights, it's just like, and in the first round, beating the Suns that had Kevin Durant, it's just, he's relentless. He doesn't care who he's going against. He's in your face. He's talking trash. And I just think that's what the league kind of needs is, who is ultimately the torch going to be passed to when LeBron leaves in the next few seasons?
Well,
and I think it's Anthony Edwards.
I mean, the league is getting killed right now because two of the best players in the game play in Denver and Minnesota. And of course, you're talking about Edwards, who plays in Minnesota. And I've already saw, someone today was like, oh, you got to get Edwards out of Minnesota, and all that kind of stuff. But the T-Wolves are looking like they're on their way to the NBA Finals, at least right now. I'm going to go a completely different route. Like you rattled off 5 different players. I'm going with Caitlin Clark because look at the Caitlin Clark hype train that she brought with her from Iowa into the WNBA. She made people be interested in WNBA preseason games, or a WNBA preseason game a week ago. And for everyone who wanted to talk about, she needs to change her shot, needs to do all this different stuff, I think it all worked. She was crossing over, breaking ankles in that preseason game against Dallas. Now they lost, but there were a lot of eyeballs on that game. So I'm going to go with her. And now they're talking about the league is going to be chartering for the first time, and she hasn't even played in a regular season game. And all of a sudden, they're going to drop $25 million a year for teams to start chartering.
Well, did you see that for the first time ever, the WNBA is doing a doubleheader for the season opener on Disney Plus? I'm pretty sure.
I didn't see that.
First time that's ever happened. And of course, who do you think is involved in one of those Disney Plus
Indiana Fever games? Caitlin Clark. That's right. And look at all the tickets that are being sold right now. All these places are selling out, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that Caitlin Clark is going to be coming to town this season. Brunson old, he's only 27.
So I was I'm talking like, look at, Wemby is 20 years old. Edwards is 22. Like when you're talking about like young, lottery pick players, those guys are barely 20, 21 years old. So I'm like, he's not old. I'm talking like relative to like NBA players, right? Like he's just now getting into his groove at 27, which there's nothing wrong with that. I just think if you're talking about a guy who is, the most exciting or whatever, the current, kind of face of the game, it's not a guy. It's just a little bit younger of a guy that's, going to kind of take off still.
Yep. Eric says women's basketball, Notre Dame about to be in its own level. Dynasty started yesterday, and I've seen some national people
after the transfer portal and the signings. It's like the Avengers team the A squad is coming together.
Seriously, they had to up it because these other South Carolina, South Carolina is already going to be loaded. USC loaded up on the transfer portal, and Niele Ivey had to answer, and she answered big time.
Doesn't it just make you think back more and more to that Connecticut coach's quote from a few years ago that we've talked about? Like, get your shots in now, get us while we have some injuries. Because it's like Notre Dame's getting all their stars back. They've added, crazy talent from not only from, new signings and getting some bigs, but also the transfer portal. It's like, I just think about that more. Like, that's all I could think about yesterday when all like that news kept rolling in of all these different players coming to Notre Dame. It's like, man, you might as well. I hope you got your laughs and your kicks in now, because, and that's the crazy thing is like Notre Dame still was a very we're talking about a team that went to the Sweet 16 back-to-back years. Like, this isn't a pushover of a team by any means, but like in terms of, obviously the end goal is national championship. So I hope that these teams, they got their shots in now, because I think the best of Notre Dame women's basketball and the Niele Ivey era is still to come.
It's going to be scary because not only are you adding 2 first-team all-conference players from the transfer portal, but you're also getting a first-team all-conference / all-American player back with Olivia Miles after she missed all of last year with injury. And then you've already got, Hidalgo, as Herrick is pointing out, Hidalgo, Citron, Maddie Westbelt. Vince and I talked about this yesterday. 6 players that Notre Dame women's basketball will have going into next season have been first-team all-conference at one point in their career.
You don't even have enough starting spots for everyone.
Yeah, and they're just going to have crazy depth in both the front court and the back court, and there's just so much mixing and matching that they're going to be able. Like, they can literally run a couple of different lines of players out there, and you wouldn't even see that much drop off. if you just went, straight up.
I meant to say, when we were back and this reminded me because Notre Dame is going to play relentless defense, I think, with a lot of this depth that they're going to have.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me think of, when we were talking about the NBA question prior and Anthony Edwards, and everyone's kind of overall complaint is no one plays defense in the NBA. I want everyone to go back and watch the first 2 games of the Nuggets and Timberwolves and watch what the Wolves have done to the Nuggets defensively. It is imagine if you're a guard for the Nuggets, they're literally picking you up the entire court, right? The whole court, you're getting pressed. And then finally, when they get tired, you have 2 7-foot towers of Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns just waiting for you underneath the rim. You talk about really good defense. It's been a lot of fun to watch. But I think to kind of tie it all back in with Notre Dame getting this really good big and their depth at the guard position between Citron, Hidalgo, this girl that's transferring in from Pittsburgh, Marquette, they're going to be really good defensively. And we all know that Hannah Hidalgo's, led the nation in steals, was the all-conference defensive player. I think you're going to see that game elevate and everyone else's defensive, game elevate around her.
Well, and again, they were thin, obviously, with their bench. And during that 10-game winning streak, they were holding teams to 56, 57 points a game. And again, now they're going to be, they'll get a reset. You start at full strength and you add these other 2 players. Defense should be just even better. It's going to be a lot of fun. Did you want to take another crack at saying the coach's name? Salty's going to give you a hard T. There you go.
When you're trying to say things in succession and fast and you're kind of everything's happening at once.
It trips, it stumbles off the tongue sometimes.
Yeah.
So we were talking about
enunciation is hard.
Yeah. We were talking about possible Shamrock Series sites, and Ken said, did anyone say Shamrock Series game at Jerry World in Dallas? I enjoyed that. That was a great trip. Now,
it was great for us because we saw both teams in the same weekend.
But that's a great stadium. But they've played 2 college football playoff games there since then, so I don't know that there's any novelty left. They've played there 3 times now already, so I don't know if they would necessarily want to again. But it's a great venue. It's a great place, and they definitely turned out for it down there. We were talking about the starter jacket debacle that I've got earlier. And Corey said he had a starter jacket in the early 90s. And that's kind of the vintage starter jacket that I'm trying to get if it would show up via eBay. Getting a little frustrated. So what's the verdict on that? We were talking about that. So do I just sit and wait and ride it out? Do I wait until the end of the week?
Just let eBay. I say you give the guy a message. Say, hey, it's been 2 weeks. You gonna mail it or not? I'd love to get it. If not, I'd hate to leave you a bad review. Right? I think you put the pressure on him, and then ultimately, like I said, if eBay has a time frame where they're just gonna call it, you know what I mean? If the person hasn't sent it, they're gonna void the transaction and they're gonna refund you your money. I think there's no harm of trying to wait it out and see if you can get the jacket, because that's ultimately what you care about. You don't care about getting your money back or the money of it. You just want your jacket, right? And so if you can wait it out and try to get it, I think that's the plan.
Yeah. K-Mac asking if it's been 2 weeks. I ordered it on April 25th. So we're going on 2 weeks at this point. I like the say, hey, man, what's up? Negative review coming if we don't see some movement here.
Yes.
I think that sounds like the way to go. So, Jess, you said last week that you had not watched Top Gun Maverick yet. I don't even know. I don't know the answer to this question. Have you at least watched the original Top Gun?
So I'd be lying if I said I've sat down and watched it on my own. I know that I've seen it while you've been watching it. Okay. That's my answer. I don't know if I can't recall a time where I've seen it start to finish, but I know I've seen a lot of bits and pieces as you have watched it.
This is fairly embarrassing. To say you grew up in this household, because literally Top Gun, the original Top Gun, is probably the movie I have seen the most in my lifetime. And Are you? So I guess my question to you is:
That thing came out 10 years before I was even born.
It's true, it's true. But my question is: are you ready for a Top Gun doubleheader when you come back for Mother's Day?
I don't know if that's what my mother would enjoy for Mother's Day is a Top Gun marathon, but you know, I just know I have a bunch of landscape to get done. So if Top Gun cuts into landscape time, I think we might have some issues.
Well, your mother is, very high on Top Gun and Maverick as well. So I can see this happening.
She just enjoys watching.
Maybe when are you coming back? Do you even know yet?
No, I got a busy day tomorrow. I was hoping tomorrow.
Screwed the whole schedule up again.
So tomorrow,
I was going to say maybe you need to try to watch Top Gun before you come back, because I have Top Gun Maverick on the DVR ready to go. I went to bed the other night and wasn't ready to fall asleep yet. And we were talking about the scene at the beginning of the movie on last week's Rapid Fire show. So I was like, I'm just going to watch. I'm going to watch it, up through that scene, and then I'll just kind of go to sleep. So instead, I ended up watching half the movie the other night, and then I did go to sleep. But I'm ready. I'm ready for another. It's very rewatchable. Very rewatchable. So, all right. I think that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate everybody being here. As always, still trying to figure out who's going to be here for tomorrow's show, because I keep hearing about all these conflicts that everybody's.
Well, listen, this is Vince. It is Vince days of the day of the week, so I can't be held accountable for.
True statement. It's a true statement.
I plan my week around thinking that Vince is gonna, step up and be here on Wednesdays, and so when I schedule, when I schedule my baseball practices, I was like, you know what is a really good day? Wednesday. That's Vince's day. It doesn't conflict with Tuesday.
Right.
Tuesday.
So the first thing that happens is Vince has got something going on. Yes. Of course. Hey, hit that like button before you leave. We appreciate you as always. Remember, hitting that like button helps us out greatly and fights our aggressor.
The more likes, the more money we get paid.
Algorithms. That's right. That's exactly right. So do that, and one way or another, I'll be here tomorrow. I don't know who is going to be with me, but I'll see you then on IB Nation Sports Talk.